The cantina on Nexus Prime was always dark. Smoke from a dozen different worlds drifted through the air. The smell of alien drinks mixed with the sweat of too many species crowded into one small space. Jake Collins sat at the bar, staring into his glass of whiskey. 3 years since the war ended, and he still came here every night. The bartender was Lisa Morgan. She used to be a combat medic during the war. Now she served drinks to veterans who could not sleep. Her hands moved quickly as she cleaned glasses. She knew most of the regulars by now. Jake was always quiet. He never talked about what happened during the war. The cantina door opened with a hiss. A large figure walked in. 6 arms, green-scaled, skin and yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. It was a Vraxian. Jake had not seen one of those since the fighting stopped. The alien looked around the room slowly. Its gaze stopped on Jake. The Vraxian walked over to the bar. It moved carefully like it was in pain. Old wounds, Jake thought. Every veteran in this place had them. The alien sat down 2 stools away from Jake. Its 6 arms folded on the bar counter. "Whiskey," the Vraxian said in broken English. Its voice was deep and rough. Lisa poured the drink without asking questions. She had learned not to ask questions in this place. The Vraxian picked up the glass with one of its hands. The other hand stayed folded. Jake watched the alien from the corner of his eye. Vraxians were smart. They were the tacticians of the coalition forces. They planned the battles that killed thousands of humans. This one looked old and tired. The Vraxian drank its whiskey in one gulp. It made a face. Human alcohol was strong for most aliens, but it asked for another drink anyway. "You are human," the Vraxian said suddenly. It was looking at Jake now. "Yeah," Jake replied. He did not turn to face the alien. "You fought in the war." "Most people here did." The Vraxian was quiet for a moment. It drank its second glass of whiskey slower this time. Its yellow eyes never left Jake's face. "My name is Zephyr," the alien said. "I was a coalition intelligence officer." Jake finally turned to look at the Vraxian. Coalition intelligence. These were the aliens who tried to figure out human tactics. They studied human prisoners. They planned the attacks that were supposed to wipe out human forces. "Jake Collins," he said. "Special Operations." Zephyr nodded slowly. "I know that name. You were at Kepler 442b. Jake's hand tightened on his glass. Kepler 442b, the moon where everything changed, where the coalition learned what humans were really capable of. Jake had hoped he would never have to talk about that place again. "Maybe," Jake said. "I was there too," Zephyr said, on the other side. The cantina seemed to get quieter. Other veterans were listening now. A human and a coalition alien talking about a battle they fought against each other. This did not happen often. Lisa poured Jake another drink without being asked. She could see the tension in his shoulders. She had seen it before when veterans talked about the bad battles. Captain Roy Henderson was sitting at a table near the back. He was another regular. He commanded a fleet destroyer during the war. He moved closer to the bar to listen. "That was a bad battle," Jake said quietly. "Bad?" Zephyr's voice got louder. "Bad does not describe what happened on that moon, what your people did there. It was not war. It was something else." Jake drank his whiskey. He remembered the moon, the caves, the screaming that went on for days. He remembered Major Kate Sullivan's orders. He remembered the look in her eyes when she gave them. "We were outnumbered," Jake said. 50-1, Zephyr agreed. "We had you surrounded, cut off from your ships, no way to escape. We thought it was over. But it wasn't. No, it was not over. It was just beginning." Zephyr ordered another drink. Its hands were shaking now. Jake noticed that 2 of the aliens' 6 arms ended in metal prosthetics. "War wounds. We studied your species for years before the war," Zephyr said. "We knew how humans fought. We had seen your battles against the raiders. Simple tactics. Charge forward. Use superior firepower. Very predictable. Jake almost smiled. Predictable. That was what they all thought. Your battalion had been running for 6 days, Zephyr continued. Always retreating. Always losing ground. We thought you were broken, scared, ready to surrender. What made you think that? Your communications. We intercepted them. Your soldiers were complaining, talking about how hopeless the situation was. Some were crying. Very emotional, very human. Jake knew about those communications. They were supposed to be intercepted. Every word was carefully planned. So you followed us into the caves, Jake said. Yes. Deep into the moon. We brought 40,000 soldiers. Vraxians, Canids, the Insectoid Collective, others. The largest coalition force ever assembled. We were going to end human resistance once and for all. Zephyr drank again. Its yellow eyes were distant now, remembering. We set up around the cave system. Perfect positions. Your 800 soldiers were trapped inside. We waited for you to surrender. Standard military procedure, you had no food, no water, no ammunition. But we didn't surrender. No, you went silent. For 3 days, nothing. No communications, no movement. We thought maybe you had killed yourselves rather than be captured. Jake remembered those 3 days. The preparation, the fear, not fear of dying, but fear of what they were about to do, what Major Sullivan had ordered them to do. On the 4th day, we decided to go in and collect your bodies, Zephyr said. That was when we learned the truth about humans. The cantina was completely quiet now. Even the background music had stopped. Everyone was listening to the alien story. What truth? Jake asked, though he already knew. Zephyr looked at him with those yellow eyes. There was something in them that Jake had never seen in an alien before. Fear. Real, deep fear. That you do not fight wars the way other species do. You do not just want to win. You want to break your enemies. Not just their bodies, their minds, their spirits, everything that makes them what they are. Jake said nothing. He had heard this before from other coalition veterans. The ones who survived always said the same things. We went into those caves expecting to find dead humans, Zephyr continued. Instead, we found a nightmare. Your species had spent those 3 days preparing something that no military academy in the galaxy teaches. Something that goes beyond warfare. What do you mean? Zephyr finished its drink and set the glass down hard on the bar. The sound echoed in the quiet cantina. You weaponized our own minds against us. You turned our evolutionary instincts, our deepest fears, our biological responses into weapons. You did not just fight us. You made us fight ourselves. Jake felt the old familiar weight in his chest. The guilt. The knowledge of what humans had done on that moon. What they were capable of doing. That was just the beginning, Zephyr said, quietly. What we learned later, about how long you had been planning, how much you knew about us before the war even started, how every battle, every defeat, every retreat was part of a larger plan. The alien's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Your species does not just fight wars, Jake Collins. You weaponize everything, even your own weaknesses, even your own suffering, and that is why the coalition will never feel safe again. Zephyr stood up from the bar stool. It moved slowly like an old creature carrying too much weight. I've been trying to drink away the memories for 3 years, it said, but I cannot forget what I saw in those caves, what your people are capable of when they decide to win at any cost. The alien started to walk toward the door, then stopped and turned back. The war is over, but I still have nightmares. Not about dying. About living in a galaxy where humans exist, where creatures like you walk among the stars pretending to be civilized. Jake watched Zephyr leave the cantina. The door closed behind the alien with a soft hiss. Slowly, the normal sounds of the bar returned. Conversation started again. The music resumed, but Jake continued to stare at his drink. He knew Zephyr was right, about all of it. The war had ended, but the real battle was just beginning. Because now the galaxy knew what humans were capable of when they were truly desperate. And that knowledge would change everything. The next evening, Jake returned to the cantina. He told himself he came for the whiskey, but he knew that was a lie. He came hoping to see Zephyr again. The alien's words had stayed with him all day. Jake needed to know more about what the Coalition had seen on that moon. Lisa was behind the bar as always. She nodded when Jake sat down and poured his usual drink without being asked. The cantina was busy tonight. Veterans from a dozen different worlds sat at tables talking quietly or drinking alone. The door opened and Zephyr walked in. The Vraxian looked around the room with those yellow eyes, then walked straight to the bar. It sat in the same spot as the night before. "Whiskey," Zephyr said to Lisa. "Coming up," she replied. Her voice was neutral, but Jake could see she was nervous. Having a Coalition veteran in her bar made everyone uncomfortable. Zephyr drank its whiskey and looked at Jake. "You came back." "I come here every night," Jake said. "You want to hear the rest of the story?" It was not a question. Jake nodded. "Very well," Zephyr said. "But first, tell me something. What do you know about war leader Krex?" Jake thought for a moment. Vraxian commander. Tactical genius. He planned the siege of New Europa. He was my superior officer. The best military mind in the Coalition. Krex had never lost a battle in 40 years of warfare. He was the one who planned the attack on your battalion. Zephyr ordered another drink. Its hands were steadier tonight, but Jake could still see the fear in its eyes. Krex studied human warfare for months before Kepler 442b. He watched recordings of your battles. He read reports from captured human prisoners. He thought he understood how your minds worked. What did he think he knew? That humans were emotional fighters. That you made decisions based on feelings instead of logic. That when you were trapped and scared, you would panic and make mistakes. Jake almost laughed. The Coalition had gotten that completely wrong. Krex was confident when we surrounded your battalion, Zephyr continued. 800 humans against 40,000 Coalition forces. Perfect terrain for us, terrible for you. No escape routes, no reinforcements coming, no supplies. Jake remembered Major Kate Sullivan's briefing that day. She had stood in front of the battalion with a calm expression, explaining what they were about to do. No one had looked panicked. No one had looked scared. They all knew this was the moment they had been preparing for. Your Major Sullivan was in command, Zephyr said. You knew about her? We knew about all your officers. We had files on every human commander. Sullivan was listed as competent but impulsive, the kind of leader who would make desperate charges to save her soldiers. Jake shook his head. Major Sullivan was many things, but impulsive was not one of them. She was the most calculating person he had ever met. Every decision she made was part of a larger plan. We intercepted your communications during the first 3 days, Zephyr said. Your soldiers were talking about surrender, about how hopeless the situation was. Some were even crying. You believed it was real. Of course. Why would we not? We could hear the fear in their voices. We could see them breaking down. It confirmed everything we thought we knew about humans. Jake remembered those fake communications. The soldiers had practiced for hours to make them sound believable. Some of the crying had been real, but not from fear. From anger at what they were about to do to their enemies. On the 4th day, Krex decided to end it, Zephyr continued. He sent in the first wave to accept your surrender. 5,000 Coalition soldiers entered the cave system. Jake felt his stomach tighten. He remembered that day, the moment when everything changed. What happened to them? Jake asked. Though, he already knew. They never came back out. Zephyr's voice was quiet now. Other people in the cantina had stopped their conversations to listen. At first we thought there had been a cave-in, or maybe your soldiers had set off explosives to kill themselves and take some of us with them. Krex sent in another wave to investigate. How many? 10,000 this time. Krex was angry. He wanted to recover the bodies and finish this battle. Jake closed his eyes. He could still hear the sounds that came from the caves that day. Not explosions, not gunfire. Something much worse. The second wave made it deeper into the caves before they stopped reporting. Zephyr said. We could hear them on the communications for a while. Then the screaming started. Lisa stopped cleaning glasses. Captain Henderson moved closer to the bar. Everyone was listening now. What kind of screaming? Henderson asked. Zephyr looked at the human captain with those yellow eyes. Have you ever heard a Canid pack leader howl in despair? Have you heard insectoids trying to scream when their hive mind breaks apart? Have you heard a Vraxian warrior beg for death? Henderson shook his head. I hope you never do. Because that is what we heard coming from those caves. Not the sounds of battle, the sounds of minds breaking. Jake opened his eyes. Tell them about Dr. Murphy. Zephyr's whole body went rigid. You know about Murphy? I was there, remember? Zephyr drank. It's whiskey with shaking hands. Dr. Alan Murphy, human military psychologist. We thought he was just a medic at first. We had no idea what he really was. What was he? Lisa asked. A fear engineer, Jake said quietly. A what? Someone who studies what scares different species. What makes them panic? What breaks their minds? Zephyr nodded. Murphy had spent years learning about coalition psychology. He knew things about us that we did not know about ourselves. Things buried deep in our evolutionary past. The alien paused, staring into its drink. While we were setting up our siege, Murphy and his team were preparing the caves, not with explosives or traps, with something much worse. What? Sounds, images, smells, vibrations, everything calculated to trigger the deepest fears of each species in our army. Jake remembered watching Murphy work. The doctor had been excited like a scientist about to test a new theory. He had equipment that could produce any frequency, any scent, any visual pattern, all designed to exploit alien psychology. For my people, the Vraxians, it was high-frequency sounds, Zephyr explained. Sounds that mimicked our ancient predators from millions of years ago. Sounds that told our brains to freeze, to submit, to die quietly. What about the others? Henderson asked. The Canids heard pack calls that meant abandonment, rejection, being cast out from the group. For pack hunters, this is worse than death. Zephyr's voice was getting weaker. The insectoids were the worst. Murphy had found a way to jam their hive connection. Suddenly, creatures who had never been alone were isolated in their own minds. They went insane in minutes. Jake remembered the reports coming back from the cave sensors. Coalition soldiers, attacking each other. Some just sitting down and refusing to move. Others running deeper into the caves, trying to escape sounds that followed them everywhere. But that was not the worst part, Zephyr said. What was worse than that? The recordings. Jake felt cold. He had hoped Zephyr would not mention the recordings. What recordings? Lisa asked. Human voices, Zephyr said. Speaking our languages perfectly, pretending to be our family members, our commanders, our gods. The cantina was completely silent now. They played recordings of our own leaders calling us cowards, our families saying they were ashamed of us, our religious figures telling us, we were damned. Zephyr looked at Jake with pure hatred now. How long did you study us? How long were you preparing for this war? Jake met the alien's gaze. Long enough. The recordings were perfect. Every accent, every speech pattern, every cultural reference. You knew us better than we knew ourselves. We had to. Why? Jake was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Because we knew that if we lost this war, humanity would be extinct, so we made sure we could not lose. Zephyr finished its drink and slammed the glass down on the bar. 18,000 coalition soldiers went into those caves. Do you know how many came out? Jake shook his head, though he knew the answer. 300. And most of them were broken, mentally shattered. They could not eat, could not sleep, could not stop shaking. The alien stood up from its stool. Krex committed suicide 2 days later. The greatest military mind in coalition history killed himself rather than face what humans had done to his army. Zephyr started walking toward. The door then stopped. The war ended 6 months after Kepler 442b. Do you know why? No one answered. Because every coalition commander was afraid to fight humans after that. They realized they were not just fighting soldiers. They were fighting a species that could turn their own minds into weapons against them. The alien walked out of the cantina, leaving the humans sitting in silence. Jake stared at his drink and tried not to remember the sounds that came from those caves. The sounds of an entire army losing its sanity. The price of human survival. But he did remember. He would always remember, just like Zephyr would never forget. Jake did not come to the cantina the next night. He sat in his small apartment instead, staring at the wall. The memories from Kepler 442b were too strong now. Zephyr's words had brought back everything Jake had tried to forget. But the night after that he returned. He needed to hear the rest of the story. He needed to know what Zephyr remembered about those 3 days in the caves. The alien was already at the bar when Jake arrived. Zephyr looked worse than before. Its green scales had a gray tint and its yellow eyes were bloodshot. It had been drinking for hours. "You came back," Zephyr said without looking at Jake. "I said I would. I thought maybe you had heard enough. Maybe you did not want to remember what your people did." Jake sat down next to the alien. Lisa poured him whiskey without being asked. Other veterans in the cantina watched them carefully. Word had spread about the coalition veteran telling war stories. Everyone wanted to hear what really happened during the war. "Tell me about Lieutenant Foster," Jake said quietly. Zephyr's 6 hands clenched into fists. "How do you know that name?" "Carl Foster, psychological operations specialist. He was in the caves with us." "Foster." Zephyr spat the name like it tasted bad. "The human who broke more minds than any weapon ever built." Jake remembered Lieutenant Foster, a quiet man who spoke softly and smiled often. He looked like a teacher or a doctor. No one would have guessed what he was capable of. Foster had a team of 12 specialists, Zephyr said. Each one was an expert on different alien species. They knew our languages, our cultures, our fears. They knew things about us that our own governments kept secret. What kind of things? Everything. Our mating calls, our funeral songs, the sounds our children make when they are afraid, the words our ancestors used for death and pain and abandonment. Jake felt sick. He had not known the details back then. He had just followed orders, but now hearing it from the other side, he understood how thorough the human preparation had been. Foster's team worked in shifts during those 3 days. Zephyr continued. 24 hours a day, they broadcast sounds through the cave system. Different sounds for different species. Always perfectly timed to cause maximum psychological damage. What did they do to the insectoids? Zephyr shuddered. The collective operated as one mind spread across thousands of bodies. Foster found a way to jam their neural connections with electromagnetic pulses, but not all at once. One by one. One by one? Yes. He would cut off one insectoid from the collective, let it experience individual consciousness for a few minutes, then reconnect. The trauma of being alone, then being pulled back into the group mind, then being alone again, it drove them insane. Jake closed his eyes. He remembered the screaming that came from the insectoid tunnels. High-pitched sounds that went on for hours. Some of them started attacking their own hive mates, Zephyr said. They thought the other insectoids were trying to steal their new individual thoughts. Foster had turned their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. What about the Canids? Pack leader Vorth commanded 3,000 Canid warriors, the best hunters in the coalition army. Foster isolated them in separate cave chambers and played recordings of their own pack leaders. Recordings saying what? That they were failures, that they had brought shame to their packs, that their families no longer wanted them, that they would die alone and forgotten. Zephyr drank more whiskey. Its hands were shaking again. Canids cannot survive without their pack bonds. Foster knew this. He made them believe they had been cast out, abandoned by everyone they loved. Within hours, they stopped fighting. They just sat in the caves and howled until their voices gave out. Jake remembered Corporal Nina Bell, the communications expert. She had worked with Foster to create the fake recordings. Bell could mimic any voice, any accent, any emotional tone. She had spent months learning to sound like alien family members and commanders. The worst part was how personal it was, Zephyr said. Foster did not just use general psychological warfare. He had specific information about individual soldiers. What do you mean? He knew their names, their histories, their personal fears. When he spoke to them through the cave speakers, it was like he had lived their entire lives. Jake felt cold. How could he know that much detail? That is what terrifies me, Zephyr replied. How long had humans been studying us? How long had you been preparing for this war? Years? Decades? Jake did not answer. The truth was worse than Zephyr suspected. Foster spoke to me personally on the second day, Zephyr said quietly. What did he say? He knew about my clutch sister, Zara. She died in a mining accident when we were children. Foster played a recording of her voice calling my name, asking why I had not saved her. Zephyr's voice cracked. Jake could see tears in the alien's yellow eyes. No one knew about Zara. I never told anyone about her, but Foster knew. He knew her voice, her way of speaking, even the pet name she used for me. I'm sorry, Jake said, and he meant it. Sorry? Zephyr laughed bitterly. Your people violated my memories, used my dead sister's voice as a weapon, and you say you are sorry? Other veterans in the cantina were listening now. Captain Henderson had moved to a table nearby. Even Lisa had stopped serving drinks to listen. Foster did the same. Thing to hundreds of our soldiers, Zephyr continued. He had personal information about all of us. Dead relatives, childhood fears, shameful secrets, he used all of it. Where did the information come from? Henderson asked. Zephyr looked at the human captain with hatred. From prisoners, from captured, communications, from spies, from years of humans pretending to be our friends while they studied us like lab animals. Jake thought about the intelligence reports he had seen, files on thousands of alien individuals, psychological profiles, family histories, personal weaknesses. The human military had been building a database of alien psychology for years before. The war started, but Foster was not the only one, Zephyr said. Dr. Murphy had his own methods. Different from Foster's, Murphy worked on our biology, our evolutionary responses, things we could not control even if we wanted to. Jake remembered Dr. Murphy's equipment, machines that could produce any chemical scent, any type of radiation, any environmental condition, all designed to trigger biological fear responses in different alien species. For my people, Murphy used temperature manipulation, Zephyr explained. Vraxians are cold-blooded. Our body temperature drops, we become sluggish and confused. Murphy made sections of the caves very cold, very quickly. That doesn't sound so bad. It was not just cold, it was the exact temperature that triggers our hibernation response. Our bodies started shutting down automatically. We could not fight, could not think clearly, could not even stay awake. Jake nodded. He remembered seeing Vraxian soldiers collapsing in the caves, their bodies going into emergency hibernation mode. But Murphy added something else, Zephyr said. Chemical scents that mimicked our ancient predators, smells that told our brains that deadly hunters were nearby. So we were trapped between hibernation and panic. Both responses at once? Yes. Our bodies wanted to sleep, but our minds were screaming danger. It was like being tortured from the inside. Zephyr ordered another drink. The alien was getting very drunk now, but it kept talking. Murphy did similar things to the other species. He made the canids smell their own packmates as enemies. He made the insectoids feel vibrations that disrupted their coordination. He turned our own bodies against us. How long did this go on? 3 days. 72 hours of constant psychological and biological warfare. No breaks, no mercy, no chance to adapt or recover. Jake remembered those 3 days from the human side. Major Sullivan had insisted that they maintain the pressure continuously. No pauses that would let the aliens adjust to the attacks. By the 3rd day, coalition soldiers were fighting each other, Zephyr said. Vraxians attacking canids, insectoids trying to kill anyone who came near them. Ancient rivalries between species came out under the stress. Foster planned that too? Yes. He knew that under extreme pressure we would turn on each other. He had studied our interspecies relationships and knew exactly which buttons to push. Zephyr finished its drink and looked at Jake with exhausted eyes. Your Lieutenant Foster and Dr. Murphy did not just defeat our army. They destroyed it from the inside. They made us defeat ourselves. It ended the war, Jake said quietly. Yes, it did. Because after Kepler 442b, no coalition commander wanted to face humans in battle. We realized we were not fighting soldiers. We were fighting a species that could reach inside our minds and turn our own thoughts against us. Zephyr stood up slowly. Foster and Murphy were not warriors, they were something much worse. They were scientists who had turned psychology and biology into weapons of mass destruction. The alien walked toward the door, then stopped. The coalition surrendered because we realized that humans fight wars in ways that violate every rule of civilized conflict. You do not just want to defeat your enemies, you want to break them so completely that they can never fight again. Zephyr left the cantina, and Jake sat alone at the bar, remembering the sounds from those caves and wondering if humanity had gone too far in its quest for survival. 3 nights passed before Zephyr returned to the cantina. When the alien finally walked through the door, it looked like it had not slept in days. Its green scales were dull, and its 6 arms moved slowly. Jake had been waiting, drinking whiskey, and thinking about everything he had heard. The cantina was more crowded tonight. Word had spread through the station about the coalition veteran telling war stories. Veterans from both sides had come to listen. Humans sat next to aliens who had fought against each other years ago. Everyone wanted to hear the truth about what happened during the war. Zephyr sat down at the bar without looking at anyone. Lisa poured whiskey for the alien, then moved away quickly. She could see that Zephyr was in a dark mood tonight. You want to hear the rest? Zephyr said to Jake. It was not a question. If you want to tell it. I do not want to tell it. But I need to. Someone has to know what your species really is. Jake noticed that other people in the cantina had stopped talking. They were all listening now. Captain Henderson was at his usual table. Pete Johnson, another human veteran, had moved closer to the bar. Even some alien veterans had gathered around to hear the story. Tell me about the prisoners, Zephyr said suddenly. Jake felt his stomach drop. The prisoners. The part of the war that no one talked about. What prisoners? Henderson asked. The humans who let themselves be captured, Zephyr replied. The ones who volunteered to be tortured. The cantina went completely silent. Jake could hear the air recycling system humming in the walls. What are you talking about? Henderson said. Zephyr looked at Jake with those yellow eyes. Tell them, Jake Collins. Tell them how your people prepared for this war. Jake stared into his whiskey glass. He had hoped this part would never come up, but now, with everyone watching, he had no choice. Some humans volunteered to be captured, Jake said quietly. Before the war started, during border conflicts, they let themselves be taken prisoner so they could study alien interrogation methods. Study? Pete Johnson leaned forward. What do you mean, study? They endured real torture, Zephyr said when Jake did not answer. For months, sometimes years. They let us break their bodies and minds so they could learn how we thought, how we fought, how we treated prisoners. Jake remembered the reports. Humans who had volunteered for the most dangerous intelligence missions in military history. They allowed themselves to be captured by alien forces, knowing they would be tortured and possibly killed, all to gather information about coalition psychology and tactics. How many? Henderson asked. Hundreds, Jake said. Over 5 years before the war officially started, they pretended to be traitors, explorers, lost pilots. Zephyr continued. They acted weak and afraid when we captured them, but they were watching everything, learning everything. Jake thought about Commander Elena Brooks, the naval intelligence officer who had planned those missions. She had briefed the volunteers personally, explaining that they might not survive. But the information they gathered could save humanity if war came. We thought we were breaking them, Zephyr said. But they were studying us, learning how each species conducted interrogations, what methods we used, what we wanted to know. How we thought about prisoners in warfare. That's impossible, Henderson said. No one could endure torture just to gather intelligence. Humans could, Zephyr replied, because they were not thinking about themselves. They were thinking about their species' survival. Jake remembered reading the debriefing reports from the returned prisoners. Many had been permanently damaged by what they endured, but the information they brought back had been invaluable. Human psychologists learned exactly how different alien species approached interrogation and prisoner treatment. The worst part was that some of them did break, Zephyr said. Really broke. They gave us information that seemed valuable. Military codes, ship positions, battle plans. What was wrong with that information? It was all fake. Carefully prepared false intelligence that made us think we understood human military doctrine. Jake nodded. The false intelligence had been one of General Paul Harris's ideas. Let the aliens think they had broken human prisoners and learned human secrets. Feed them information that would make them overconfident and predictable. We thought humans were emotional fighters who made desperate charges when cornered, Zephyr continued. We thought you relied too much on technology and could not adapt quickly to changing situations. We thought you fought like every other species we had faced. But you were wrong, Pete Johnson said. Completely wrong. The prisoners had fed us a false picture of human warfare. Everything we thought we knew about humans was carefully planted misinformation. Jake remembered the briefings before Kepler 442b. Major Sullivan had explained how the intelligence from captured volunteers had shaped their strategy. They knew exactly what the coalition expected from human forces, and they planned to do the opposite. The coalition prepared for one type of war, Jake said, but we gave them a completely different war. Yes, Zephyr agreed. We prepared to fight emotional, impulsive humans who would panic under pressure. Instead, we faced something that had been planning for years. Something that knew us better than we knew ourselves. Lisa had stopped pretending to work. She was listening to every word. Other veterans in the cantina had moved closer to hear the conversation. How long? Henderson asked. How long were humans planning for this war? Jake looked at Zephyr. The alien nodded as if giving permission to tell the truth. 15 years, Jake said. From the moment humans made first contact with alien civilizations, the cantina erupted in shocked voices. Aliens and humans both started talking at once. Henderson slammed his hand on a table to restore quiet. 15 years? Pete Johnson said. But first contact was supposed to be peaceful. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges. It was peaceful, Jake replied. But our leaders knew that conflict might come eventually. So every cultural exchange, every trade mission, every diplomatic contact was also an intelligence-gathering operation. Zephyr drank its whiskey and continued the story. Humans came to our worlds as tourists and researchers. They were friendly and curious. They asked innocent questions about our history, our biology, our social structures. But it wasn't innocent. No. They were building psychological profiles of every species they met. Learning our weaknesses, our fears, our cultural pressure points. Jake thought about the massive intelligence database that human military had assembled. Detailed files on hundreds of alien species. Not just military information, but psychological and cultural data that could be used as weapons. Your entertainment industry was part of it too, Zephyr said. Human movies, music, books. You shared them freely with alien civilizations. What was wrong with sharing entertainment? Nothing was wrong with it. But it was not just entertainment. It was market. Research. You watched how different species reacted to human stories. What scared us? What confused us? What made us angry or sad? Jake nodded. The entertainment exports had been one of the most successful intelligence operations in human history. Alien reactions to human fiction had taught human psychologists exactly how different species processed fear, stress, and conflict. Even your failed diplomatic missions were planned, Zephyr continued. Times when human diplomats were expelled from alien worlds for breaking cultural taboos. We thought it was human ignorance, but it was testing. Testing what? How we reacted to cultural violations. What made us angry. How we punished offenders. All information that could be used later in psychological warfare. Jake remembered Commander Brooks explaining the diplomatic testing program. Human diplomats had deliberately violated alien customs to study the responses. Every angry reaction, every cultural punishment, every expelled diplomat had provided valuable intelligence about alien psychology. So when the war started, Henderson said slowly, humans already knew everything about their enemies. Everything, Zephyr confirmed. Our psychology, our biology, our cultures, our fears, our social structures, our military doctrines. 15 years of careful study disguised as peaceful contact. That's why Kepler 442b was so effective, Jake said. We weren't improvising. We were implementing a plan that had been years in the making. Zephyr finished its drink and looked around the cantina at all the faces watching it. The Coalition thought we were fighting a war, the alien said. But we were not fighting a war. We were subjects in a scientific experiment. An experiment to see how completely humans could manipulate and control alien behavior. Did it work? Pete Johnson asked. Look around you, Zephyr replied. The war ended with Coalition surrender. No alien government wants to fight humans again. We are all afraid of what you might do if you decide we are a threat. Jake stared at his hands. Everything Zephyr said was true. Humanity had approached the possibility of interstellar warfare like a research project. They had studied their potential enemies for years, gathering every piece of psychological and cultural intelligence they could find. And the most frightening part, Zephyr said, standing up from the bar, is that you are still doing it. Every conversation, every trade deal, every cultural exchange. You are still studying us, still learning our weaknesses, still preparing for the next war. The alien walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. A week passed before Zephyr returned to the cantina. When the alien finally walked through the door, it was not alone. 3 other Coalition veterans followed behind it. A canid with missing fur patches where torture scars showed. An insectoid that moved with jerky, broken motions. A massive bruteran whose thick skin was covered in ritual scars of shame. The cantina fell silent as the alien veterans entered. Human veterans watched them carefully. Everyone could feel the tension in the air. Zephyr led the group to a large table in the center of the room. They sat down slowly, like old creatures carrying too much weight. Lisa approached carefully with drinks. Her hands shook as she served them. Jake remained at the bar, watching. He could see that something had changed in Zephyr's yellow eyes. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with anger and determination. Tell them, the canid said to Zephyr. Its voice was hoarse and broken. Tell them what we learned. Captain Henderson and Pete Johnson moved closer to the table. Other human veterans gathered around. The alien veterans stared at them with expressions of hatred and resignation. We have been talking, Zephyr said loudly, so everyone in the cantina could hear. Sharing our experiences from the war, comparing what happened to each of our units. And, Henderson asked, and we have discovered something that makes everything worse, the insectoid said. Its voice buzzed with static from vocal damage. Something that proves the war was even more planned than we thought. Jake felt cold dread in his stomach. He had a feeling he knew what the aliens had discovered. Each of our species was defeated in a different way, Zephyr continued. We thought this was because humans adapted their tactics to each battle, but we were wrong. What do you mean? The tactics used against each species were not adaptations, the Brutaran said in a deep, rumbling voice. They were pre-planned. Strategies designed specifically for our psychology and biology. Pete Johnson sat down at the table across from the aliens. How do you know that? Because the timing was too perfect, Zephyr replied. The weapons used against my people were ready immediately, not built during the battle, but brought to the battle already prepared. The canid nodded. The recordings played to break our pack bonds. They were not made on Kepler 442b. They were recorded months earlier, with perfect voices of our specific pack leaders. Jake closed his eyes. The aliens had figured it out. The pre-planned nature of human psychological warfare strategies. Dr. Murphy's biological weapons, the insectoid added. The frequency jammers that broke our hive connections. They were custom built for our specific neural patterns. That technology took years to develop, and the cultural violations used against my people, the Bruteran said. Humans knew exactly which honor codes to break to cause maximum shame. Knowledge that could only come from years of study. Henderson looked confused. So humans had been planning specific battles for years. What's wrong with good preparation? It was not preparation for battles, Zephyr said. It was preparation for the complete psychological destruction of our species. Every tactic was designed not just to defeat us, but to break us so completely that we could never fight again. Jake ordered another whiskey. His hands were shaking now. The conversation was heading toward territory he had hoped to avoid. Show them, the Canid said to Zephyr. Zephyr reached into a bag and pulled out a data pad. It placed the device on the table where everyone could see it. We have been investigating since the war ended, Zephyr said. Using our contacts in coalition intelligence, we wanted to understand how humans had gathered so much information about us. What did you find? Lisa asked from behind the bar. That human intelligence operations began long before first contact, the insectoid replied. Your species had been monitoring our civilizations for decades before you revealed yourselves. The cantina erupted in shocked voices. Humans and aliens both began talking at once. Jake felt sick to his stomach. That's impossible, Henderson said. Humans didn't have the technology for interstellar travel until after first contact. Wrong, Zephyr said, activating the datapad. Humans had limited interstellar capability 50 years ago. They used it to place monitoring stations near our homeworlds. Images appeared on the datapad screen, satellite networks hidden in asteroid fields, listening posts disguised as space debris, observation stations positioned to intercept alien communications. Your species spent 50 years watching us, the Bruteran said, learning our languages, studying our cultures, mapping our weaknesses, all before we knew humans existed. Jake wanted to deny it, but he could not. Admiral Susan Clark had briefed him on the monitoring program once. Project Deep Watch, they had called it. 50 years of secret observation of alien civilizations. When humans finally made contact, Zephyr continued, it was not first contact. It was the beginning of a carefully planned intelligence-gathering operation disguised as peaceful diplomacy. Every human who came to our worlds was a spy, the Canid said. Traders, scientists, tourists, diplomats. All of them were gathering intelligence for future warfare. Pete Johnson shook his head. Even if that's true, why does it matter? The war is over. Humans won. Everyone has moved on. Have we? The insectoid asked. Have we really moved on? Zephyr stood up from the table. The monitoring stations are still active. The intelligence gathering continues. Human spies still operate on our worlds. What are you talking about? Your species is still preparing for war, Zephyr said. Still studying us, still learning our weaknesses, still developing new psychological weapons. Jake felt the weight of truth in the alien's words. He knew about the ongoing intelligence operations. The war had ended, but the studying had never stopped. Dr. Frank White, the Bruteran said. Human xenobiologist currently working on a research station near our homeworld. His published papers claim to study alien evolution, but his real work is developing new biological weapons. Commander Elena Brooks, the Canid added. Still active in human intelligence, still recruiting assets on coalition worlds, still building files on our leaders and military commanders. Jake recognized both names. The intelligence network was indeed still active. Project Deep Watch never ended, Zephyr said. It expanded. Now humans monitor every aspect of alien civilization. Political movements, social changes, technological developments, military innovations. Why? Henderson asked. The war is over. There's peace now. Is there? The insectoid replied. Or is this just a pause between wars while humans prepare for the next conflict? Zephyr looked around the cantina at all the human faces watching. Your species does not fight wars like other species do, the alien said. Other species fight when threatened, when resources are scarce, when territories overlap. But humans fight because you plan to fight. That's not true, Pete Johnson protested. Is it not? You study potential enemies for decades before conflicts. Begin. You prepare psychological weapons before wars are declared. You manipulate enemy civilizations while pretending to be their friends. Jake could not argue with that assessment. It was accurate. The coalition governments know this now, the Bruderin said. We know that humans are still watching us, still preparing, so we are afraid. Always afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that if humans decide we are a threat, you will destroy us before we even know there is a conflict, Zephyr replied. The alien walked over to Jake at the bar. Its yellow eyes stared into Jake's face. Tell me, Jake Collins, are we right to be afraid? Jake looked at the alien for a long moment. He thought about Project Deepwatch, about the ongoing intelligence operations, about the human military's continued development of psychological weapons. He thought about what humanity would do if they decided another war was necessary. Yes, Jake said quietly. You are right to be afraid. Zephyr nodded slowly. Because humans do not just win wars. You prevent wars by making your enemies too terrified to fight them. That's the point, isn't it? Jake replied. To be so scary that no one wants to fight us again. And it works, the Canid said bitterly. No coalition government will ever challenge human interests. We are too afraid of what you might do to us. Zephyr moved toward the door, followed by the other alien veterans. The war never ended, Zephyr said as it left. It just became invisible. A psychological war where humans control everything, by making sure everyone else is too frightened to resist. The door closed behind the aliens, leaving the human veterans sitting in uncomfortable silence. Is it true? Henderson asked Jake. Are we still gathering intelligence? Still preparing for wars that haven't started yet? Jake finished his whiskey and set the glass down on the bar. What do you think happens when a species survives by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone else? He replied. Do you think we just stop being smart and ruthless when the immediate threat is gone? Henderson had no answer to that. Jake stood up and walked toward the door. As he left the cantina, he heard Pete Johnson ask Lisa a question. Do you think we're the good guys in this story? Lisa's answer followed Jake out into the corridor. I think we're the survivors. Whether that makes us good or bad, I guess that depends on who's telling the story. Jake walked back to his apartment, knowing that humanity had won more than just a war. They had won the right to never be threatened. Again, by making sure every other species in the galaxy would always be too afraid to try.